Hello, everyone. I hope that you are doing well. Today we have a special guest with us, Zak Lyon with Royal Products. Zak, thanks for being with us today.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, so Royal Products is an industry leader in the work holding space, and Zak is going to be giving us the ins and outs of work holding on your lathes. But before we get into that, Zak, why don't you give us a little bit about yourself, how you got into doing what you do at Royal, and then some history on Royal.
Okay, great. So for myself, my background, I've been in the industry since 2008. I came in right before the bubble burst, so I kind of got started as lots of people were leaving the industry. It was kind of chaotic. I started as a little bit of an apps engineer, more on the sales side, working with the educational side of things through a company. The company is MCO Meyer. They're an Austrian machine tool builder. So I started out on the OEM side because everybody was leaving. Right, they were cutting a lot of people from the top. I rose quickly, got thrusted into doing turnkeys, helping figure out programming, processes, a little bit of everything. I had some great mentors, tutors at the time. So, they were able to kind of guide me through. Eventually, I got to a point where I was an applications manager. And at that same time, it was time for me to, choose another path. I started with Hydromat, was with Hydromat for a couple of years. And with a young family, I decided that I needed to have another change so I could be home more. And luckily, I kind of, this opportunity with Royal opened up, and it's been an awesome fit. I've been here since 2018.
Oh, wow, that's great. That's a great story. I can't imagine coming in 2008, like wondering, are things going to get better? Are they going to get worse? What's going on? When are they going to get better? So yeah, that's a good story. So since you joined at Royal, can you give us a little bit of history on Royal and how you guys got into the work holding space?
Absolutely. So Royal has been in business. We've been in business since 1946. And, obviously back then there weren't CNC machines available. So our business model centered around manual machines. We did manual chucks, manual tool holders for engine lathes. We also had live centers and dead centers, and different things like that. And over the years, we progressed into other areas as an accessory provider. We've gotten into some automation. Like today, we have what we call a rotor rack, which is a parts accumulation table. We do mist collectors. Lots of people don't necessarily know that we do that, but we've been doing that since, I believe, the 70s, maybe the 80s. Been importing a product from the UK. It's phenomenal. It's called Filter Mist. We still make live and dead centers in-house in our facility. We've been on Long Island, based in Long Island, New York, ever since the 40s, and we're still there today. Over that period of time, we moved from jaw chucks to collet chucks, and we found a pretty good niche for us with work holding, primarily for turning centers. We're branching out into the milling side of things now, getting a lot of success as a request from our customers. But we primarily do OD collet chucks and ID collet systems.
Yeah, and that's one thing on the milling side that I wanted to talk about real quick before we get on the lathe side. Is that something that you guys are really excited, kind of gearing up, putting a lot of effort into the milling solutions for the customers?
Absolutely. It's something that we've come out with. We have a 0-point system now. So we kind of dipped our toe in the water with our quick change system. We came out with some milling fixtures to utilize those, just to kind of see what the temperature was, if customers were going to use it. Oddly enough, the more we got involved with it, we found out a lot of customers do round parts in mills. So lots of customers are transitioning over to that, mainly because of the benefits with setup, as opposed to doing it in a vise. And as the volume started to kind of tick up a little bit, more people were coming to us saying, oh, this would be great if I had an easier way to take it on and off and still be able to use my vise. So now we have a 0-point system that allows us to kind of transition. But I've had projects from, we've done tombstones with putting our fixtures on those. We've worked with some tooling work holding manufacturers to build the tombstone for customers. That way they can kind of have one all-encompassing fixture as opposed to 15 different fixtures to do all the specialty different parts. So it's been great.
That's awesome. And do you want to kind of, and maybe we can put a picture or a video of the 0 point system up on the screen, but a little bit more of a visual description versus kind of what someone may be used to if they haven't seen it yet.
Yes. So with the 0 point system, what's unique about ours, I mean, everybody's probably familiar with some point of like a ball lock system. I mean, those types of systems have been out for a long period of time. We aren't doing a ball lock. Ours is going to be purely manual at this moment in time. We haven't ventured into the automated powered systems that you would run into with robot loading and unloading and things like that. So we're really focused on the job shop area. And so you'll have a large pull stud that'll go down into a receiver, and that receiver will be manually actuated. Now, what's a little unique with us as opposed to some of the other ones that are in the industry, our receiver is available with a base plate and a top plate from us, but you can buy just the receiver and you can make your own. So lots of customers have liked that aspect because sometimes in certain machines, Z height or overall stakeout, things like that, clearances might be an issue. So being able to make their own bases to mount our receivers to makes it really, really nice.
Yeah, that kind of adds that flexibility that they may need for whatever types of parts that they have. Now, I did notice that you talked about that this is really for the job shops right now. What is adding this 0 point system to a job shop? What's that benefit that they can really be looking for with that?
So the big thing with job shops that I think, and we'll get into it when we're talking about the work holding, is the labor force. Labor force right now is driving a lot of things. I know you guys with the HEH side of things do a lot of automation, so you kind of see a lot of that labor situation, the problems of getting people to show up to work, getting skilled people, I think is probably the bigger one. And so whenever you're taking a fixture out of a machine and you're putting another fixture in, you have to really know how to navigate through a control. There are lots of shops. Very, very, very rarely do you have a shop that's going to standardize in one particular brand of machine. Well, there are lots of companies that have 5 or 6 different versions of a FANUC control or some proprietary controls. So having the ability to be able to know how to navigate through that control is one skill set that somebody may not possess. Also being able to come down and touch off and find zero and center line of whatever fixture they're putting on there, so that when they're actually machining, it's all being done accurately. So there's a huge skill gap that's going on. This would allow a setup operator, who is probably the more senior individual setup person that's in a shop, do the initial setup, and then you can quickly remove a fixture, set it down, grab another fixture, put it in, clamp it down, and you're going to repeat within a tenth or better. So it's going to give you repeatability. You're able to do setups offline so that you can become more proficient, more work flowing through, as well as rigidity. I mean, our system's going to give you 11,000 pounds of clamping force on a manual setup. You compare that to a lot of other systems that are manual, you're going to be in that 4,000 or 5,000 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah. Nearly
Wow.
double.
Well, I mean, the skill gap for sure, that's something that everybody's talking about. So being able to provide a product like you guys are to the job shops and really anybody in manufacturing that is struggling with any part of their manufacturing process and not having the people to do what they need to do is a huge benefit. I mean, like you said, on the HEH side, we see it with the cobots and the automation a lot. So it's definitely going that way, and it's great seeing and hearing, companies like Royal that are seeing that that's an issue and coming up and developing products that can help job shops and manufacturers all over. So that's awesome.
Yep.
So let's jump into a little bit more on the work holding side. So could you give us kind of just maybe top 3 to 5 things to really look for before you start choosing your work holding?
Well, I think it really depends on the shop. It depends on the situation. But essentially what you're doing is you're looking at part size and range of sizes, as well as a variance of volume. So you're kind of looking at, when I go into a shop, normally what somebody will tell me is, I got an 8-inch chuck machine or a 10-inch chuck machine. What they're referring to is the size of the 3-jaw chuck that came with the machine standard. It literally doesn't tell me anything about what machine capabilities or anything like that, horsepowers, I mean, because they're all over the map. But it tells me that that machine is capable of holding a 10-inch part. And so, you know, somebody might use that system to go all the way down to 1 inch and then maybe to 2 inch and a 3 inch, but they're going to jump all the way up to a 10 inch. So really you need to kind of figure out what's the volume in that range. We might have a situation where we might make one part that is 6 inches and then another part right behind that one is going to be 3 inches and it might be one part. So that's your true job shop. They don't know what they're doing. Your middle of the road, it might make 50 pieces of a particular size. They might have another machine next to it that might have some capacity. So it really just depends on the shop and what they're trying to look at, but what they're trying to do. But I know we're going to get into it here a little bit on the work quoting side. You've really got 3 different setups. You've got custom fixturing, which would be made specifically for a high volume application or something that requires something that's very part specific. Then you've got your all-encompassing jaw chucks, and then you've got collet systems.
All right, so let's dive into the different types of jaw chucks. Can you tell us a little bit about what the different ones are and where they are beneficial?
Absolutely. So essentially you've got 4 different common ones, I would say, that we typically see. 6 jaw chucks, which are a little bit more specialized for bigger work pieces. You get 6 points of contact. There's lots of benefits for those, but predominantly you're going to see a 2 jaw chuck or a 3 jaw chuck. The other option is a 4 jaw chuck. Those are typically, again, more specialized. Most of the time those are going to be 4 jaw independent chucks. So you're dealing with castings or forgings that you may be difficult with variances to try to find center line and get everything on center to be able to do whatever machining needs to be required. But typically you're going to have a 2 jaw chuck or a 3 jaw chuck. 3 jaw chucks come with machines. Historically, if I'm buying a machine, most of the time the machine is being built with an actuator, and the company providing that actuator is also providing the 3 jaw chuck. So you guys are a Mazak rep. Most of Mazak machines, standard, come with Kitagawa systems, Kitagawa hydraulic cylinders, and so it's going to come with a Kitagawa chuck. That's not always the case. There are lots of cases where there's different things, but in standard, the machines coming out of Kentucky are going to be that. So what I have started to see here recently is companies are starting to do sort of a delete option where they're not offering that 3 jaw chuck because more and more shops are moving away from it. You know, they might have a situation where they need a 2 jaw chuck. They don't need the 3 jaw chuck. The 2 jaw chuck is going to be something that they're going to need if maybe they're doing a square piece, or they're doing something where they're clamping it from either ends and they need to have clearance to be able to have access to this side of it, where having a 3 jaw coming in, one of those jaws might be in the way of a milling operation or something like that. Or they might need to go to a 6 jaw chuck, or they might need to go to an ID mandrel or a collet system. So more and more we're starting to find these companies that are either building machines or bringing machines over from overseas are bringing them over without 3 jaw chucks more predominantly, so they can add whatever work holding is needed for that specific customer.
All right, so now that we are kind of seeing the trend of shops moving from the 2-3 style jaw chucks to different types of collet systems, can you talk about the different systems that Royal offers?
Absolutely. So we still offer 2 types of systems today. The new system, which is the quick change, which I'll get into, but we also offer an older style that we call a spring style system. This was a system that was offered long ago. It was the way collets were originally designed. It's a 1-piece collet. It connects internally inside the collet itself. It's threaded in, and it's a long collet and has a long slit into it. So the way it opens and closes is kind of like a spring. All your clamping force is focused out towards the face of the collet. One of the downsides to it really is the range of the system. So typically a collet may stroke, open and close, somewhere between 7 to 10 thou in reality. You know, a lot of that's going to be dictated by the operator and how much they thread it into the collet chuck. So I might really wrench on it. I might see a full 10 thou of movement. You might do it and you might see 7 or 8, you know, or I might, you know, barely put it in. It might cross thread it a little bit and I'm really not getting any movement. You've been doing it a lot longer. You back it out, you put it back in, and then, you know, we're getting a lot more. So it really varies, but one of the big things that customers would do with that type of system is they would get a lot of collets. Because you're limited on the stroke, you have to have a lot of collets on hand. So those types of systems are 5C systems, 16C systems, 3J. We get into S chucks, which are S20, S26, S30. Those are all common in the industry. We still offer systems that support that, but the industry is really moving away from it because, again, stroke, you know, more and more companies are getting into a situation where where's the material coming from, right? Material variances are all over the place. So if I'm buying material from somebody, then it's traditionally 10 thou over. I might have a collet set up specifically for that, and I might be okay. But that supplier now is no longer able to deliver to me. I got to go find somebody else. That next supplier might be 20 thou over, might be 30 thou over, 40 thou over. We're kind of seeing it everywhere. So I have to have basically every size humanly possible to fit the smallest to the largest capacity of that system. With the quick change system, you don't really have to do that. Our quick grip collet chuck guarantees or offers 60 thou a stroke. So we're on the high side of a spring style collet, we're giving you 6 times. In a lot of cases, we're giving you 10 plus capability to what you would have. And it doesn't matter whether you put the collet in, I put the collet in, or somebody else puts the collet in. The way that it's designed, it has like a little hook and groove area. And once I get it in there and fully seated, it's going to be the same every time.
Yeah, so that really kind of gives you the flexibility versus it sounds like with the spring style, you have to have all those chucks in there, but with the quick change, you got a lot more flexibility. You don't have to keep all those collets in stock. So that kind of, you know, that seems like a benefit in itself. And I mean, is that why one of the main reasons why Royal developed the quick change system?
Well, actually, we didn't develop the quick change system. There was another company out of Germany that designed this back in the 90s. But our owner, Alan Curran, he was over at EMO or somewhere over in Europe, and he saw the system and quickly realized this is the way of the future. This is where the industry is going to go. So us, as well as some other manufacturers here in the U.S., all kind of started to come up with our way of doing it. Now we feel we've made some improvements upon it, and we offer more stroke or guarantee more stroke than some of the others. We also tried to make it more for the U.S. market. You know, we do carry everything in stock. Chucks are in stock, collets are in stock. Everything's readily available. We can make customs. We can deliver now. The U.S. market needs stuff now, right? Everything is reactionary. As much as we want to be planners, it's very hard to be planners, especially when, you know, one shop may have an issue. Somebody's going to send it out to bid to somebody else right next door or down the street to another city. They're going to pick that job up and they're going to need to produce it now. We have the inventory to support that. But I think the industry as a whole is moving over that way, going back to the labor situation, right? Mm-hmm. I talked a little bit about the spring style collets where the stroke might be different from you to me to anybody else. If I have a jaw chuck and I want to change over, I have to know how to be able to write a program a little bit. I have to be able to count serrations. I might have to bore soft jaws to do all of this, or I might be using hard jaws, or I might be using pie jaws. So the setup and the skill set required for a jaw chuck to change over from job to job to job to job is pretty high. Same thing could be happening with a 5C or a spring style collet. I have to know that, you know, hey, the material's not loading. Why isn't it loading? Right? There's troubleshooting that kind of goes into that. With the quick change system, let's say I have a 1-inch part, my collet's going to open 30 thou above that. guaranteed. In a lot of cases, we open more, right? A lot of it just depends on the draw tube, but it's going to open enough for that material to load in. So if I'm a production supervisor or I'm a shop owner, I don't have to buy every single size. And I can trust and know that as long as my material provider is within a certain range, I only have to buy one collet to be able to supply and get the job done.
Yeah, so it sounds like not only is Royal keeping up with the times and keeping up with the technology that they need to provide to the industry, but you're also recognizing, like I said earlier, that those skill gaps are real, and you're seeing customers move away from the jaw chucks. You're seeing them move away from the spring style because the type of the skill set that unfortunately is not readily available here right now. Hopefully that improves in the future. So this quick change system really kind of eliminates any of that and allows people to come in, maybe they're fresh, they're new, or coming over from a different machine to be able to run a part, easier than they would in all those changeovers on a jaw or a spring style. So yeah, that's super interesting. Now with that, is there any types of situations you can think of where the quick change collet may not be the best solution for a shop?
It happens probably a lot more than I care to admit. Myself, coming from the applications background, I will go in and I will look at it from an applications perspective. I try to ask a customer, and that's something that being at Royal, we don't want to give somebody or have somebody purchase something that's not going to work for them, right? Because I personally wouldn't want to spend money on something that I'm never going to use. So we do our due diligence to try to make sure that it is the right fit. So I try to find out, okay, for this particular job, it is a good fit. What else do you do? What else are you planning to run? What's that matrix? What's that mix look like? And once we figure that out, then I can say, right, okay, we're doing 60% of stuff that fits in the collet. It's a good fit, right? And I try to get the customer to agree with it. If they don't feel comfortable with it, that's fine. We just have them understand that, hey, just because you're trying to run all this stuff through this machine doesn't mean it all has to go through here. Maybe you can mix some stuff up and you can go over to this machine. So there are lots of cases where mix comes into play to where going to a collet system may not be the right fit for a company. There's other accessories out there that may be able to make that transition from going from a collet chuck to a jaw chuck to a mandrel to something else a little bit easier. I had a situation where I got taken into a customer. This is out in Western Ohio, and that company had a huge investment of custom jaws. Racks and racks and racks of custom jaws that were made up for what they needed. They wanted to be able to do these parts. Now, most of the parts I could do in a collet, but there was about 5 or 6 big parts that I couldn't do. And I knew that going from this big, it was almost like a 20-inch jaw chuck, to a collet chuck would just be a huge task to do. I put them in touch with another company that could help them make that transition because they were buying a new machine. That chuck was 30 years old, needed to be updated, right? It needed to be made new.
Right.
So I put them in touch with somebody. So if we're ever not a fit, I try to let somebody, hey, go over to this company.
Sure. So, well, when you are a fit, right, it works. And so I think the other thing, too, you talked about mix and different part sizes. Can you talk about the different sizes of collet systems, small all the way to large, or the ranges in between each one for the collet systems that you guys manufacture?
Absolutely. So like I said before, we still make spring-style collet systems. So I still make 5C chucks, I make 16C chucks, and I make 3J chucks. We stopped making the S chucks just because they weren't, so a 5C is going to go up to 1 inch. A 16C is an inch and 5/8. Then a 3J is an inch and 3/4. So, that's kind of, and they all go all the way down to nothing and then up to that range. And then if you wanted to do something larger than a 3J, you would go predominantly to an S chuck. S20 is 2 inch, S26, 2.6, S30 is 3 inch. The numbers are pretty straightforward. The volume there, once we started making the quick change chucks, really fell off really quick because we were able to give customers the capacity of the larger things, which might match the capacity of the machine, but we made the stroke better, and we made that transition of changeover easier for them. So we started selling a lot more quick change chucks. But what we did do is we made adapters for our chucks that will still accept those S pads. So if you were somebody that had S chucks and had a bunch of S pads, cabinets full of them, you already have an investment of it, you wanted to utilize those, you didn't want to jump right into buying a bunch of collets, you could buy the master collet and then slowly transition your way into it. So we still do those. But on the quick change, we have 5 sizes: 42, 52, 65, 80, and 100. Now what those numbers mean, those are the metric through capacities of the collet system. So 42 millimeter, 52 millimeter, 65, 80, and 100. And so every one of those is going to give you a collet system that's going to range, 60. Our largest one's going to give you plus or minus 40, so 80 thou on the QG100. But you're going to get 60 thou a stroke. And you're going to be able to start from 3/16 on the 42, 52, 65. When you jump to the 80, the smallest you're going to do is a quarter. When you jump to the 100, the smallest you're going to do is 5/8. But we can do that in turning. We can do the same thing in milling fixtures with powered mill fixtures as well as a manual mill fixture.
That's a pretty good range.
It hits probably, we're an 80-20 company. We look at it from, we want, to be able to hit 80% of the market, what they're going to see. And that's predominantly what we see. Most customers go up to that 4-inch range. Then after that 4-inch, there's a huge jump to 6, 7, 8. Then there's an even larger jump up to even larger capacity. So,
is there really?
Yes. Typically.
Interesting. All right. I didn't know that. Well, I think we covered a lot on the spring and the quick change collets. Let's go over to the ID systems. What types of ID systems does Royal offer? And can you explain that? Someone new to work holding may not understand the difference between a quick change collet and like an ID system.
No, absolutely. So with the ID mandrel, you might run into a situation where, let's say on the sub spindle of a machine, you don't want to grab on the exterior of it. You don't want to grab on the OD. Maybe there's a bore or something like that that you could clamp onto. In a 3-jaw chuck, what you would do is you would take soft jaws, you would bore them down, and then you would just open up into the ID. You're still getting pointed contact. It's not really cylindrical, right? You could distort the part. Clamping forces kind of go all over the map. So people use ID mandrels. So we offer kind of an array of different setups. So obviously we can do it turning. We can do it in milling. We also have a manual system that you could put in lots of different machines. Lots of customers will buy our manual setup and put it in a grinder because grinders don't have, most don't have actuators on them. It's very difficult to have that built in there. But with our mandrels, we offer a stock setup, right, for immediate delivery, which again hits what we feel like 80% of what you're going to do, right, because you're doing it, let's say, out of bar stock. So you're going to be dealing with the bar capacity of a machine, which is typically 3 1/4, 3-inch and down. So we can basically handle off the shelf 1/2 inch to 3 1/4. That's stocked, warehoused in our facility in Long Island, New York. But I can do specials. I've done some applications. I did an 8 millimeter application, so it's really, really, really small. And then we have the capability to go up to 25 inches. So there really isn't really anything out there that isn't within the realm of capability that we could offer. But you've got different styles of mandrels too. So you've got singular one-piece collets. That's like what we do with our stock setup, right? So it's just going to be one collet. You're going to slide over the mandrel. You're going to have, so going backwards, you have a chuck that's mounted to the spindle. Then you have a mandrel that's going to have a capacity range on it. That's going to be bolted to the chuck body. And then you're going to have, we call it a sleeve, but you're going to have a collet or a sleeve that's going to have a range on it specifically for that bore. And then you're going to have a pin. And that pin's going to go through, connect to the draw tube. As you actuate it, it's going to pull the pin down, cause the collet to expand. That's going to give your clamping. So you can do that in a
Okay.
one-piece collet, one-piece sleeve, or, when you get into really big stuff, like I did a robot application where, robots require, because they're auto loading, they require a lot of stroke, right, to compensate for the inaccuracies of maybe the loading, the fixturing, whatever might be going on with the robot. We needed to offer, we needed to offer 130. I think it was 120 or 130 thousandths was what the robot wanted.
Oh my
Yeah, it
gosh.
was a lot. It was a big,
Wow.
huge casting. So we came up with a system that was going to give them 20 or 200 thousandths of stroke. So it's a completely different style of
Okay.
system. It's a segmented piece. So, now you've got segments that are going out making pointed contact, but we had to have a large lead-in chamfer. It was a really big, long tubing job. Those are the type of applications that I spend most of my time working with. I mean, most of our stuff is really well displayed in our catalog. You can look online and you can see all this different stuff that we offer, but it's always I have this idea. I'd like to do this. What do you think about that? I come in and try to see if it's feasible.
Evaluate that project. Yeah. Now, do you want to get into a little bit more? So I didn't know that you guys did custom systems over
Mm-hmm.
there. So do you want to talk about the different types of custom systems that you do, how that process looks for you guys when you come in and talk to the customer, evaluate the project?
Absolutely. So on the custom side of things, it really on the mandrels is pretty straightforward. We just need a part print, understanding of what it looks like. How are we receiving it? Right? Is it a casting? Is it a forging? Is it a pre-cut blank? What does the part look like when we get it? Where are we clamping? Is there air sense? Do we need to auto comp it? Right? And all of these different, coolant through. How are we ejecting the part? Right? That's another thing that kind of gets into it. OD clamp, IED clamp. So what's really best in those situations is to reach out, depending on who's watching this and what area of the country they're in, reach out to our office. Our office will put you in touch with somebody like myself. We can come in and talk about the application. But it doesn't matter if it's OD clamping or if it's ID clamping. I did a big project for a company. We did all custom fixtures. It was nothing that was in our catalog. It was utilizing our standard collets. So what made that project made sense was the volume, right? It was a high volume job for the customer. It was also a high volume production run for us. So I'm able to take that Long Island rate, I'm able to condense it down because I'm making a lot of the same thing, right? If I'm making one of something, it's a little bit more expensive than it is making 50 of something. So
Sure.
now that doesn't really come into play when I'm talking about our collets because we make a lot of collets all the time. We've got machines dedicated to those, and it, that's a whole different business model. But when it's custom fixturing, custom work holding, that's kind of volume based to whether or not it makes sense. And again, it kind of goes back to, does it make sense for the customer? If it makes them more money at the end of the day, it makes them more profitable, then we want to help them do that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Zach, thanks so much for being with us. I think we reviewed a ton of really good information that I learned, and I'm sure some of our listeners have learned something new. Just for some closing remarks, is there anything that Royal is really excited about for this year in 2023?
Yes, actually, we showed a product along with our 0 point at IMTS last year. It was an ODID chuck, and that is something that is still in the works. We're trying to make it as bulletproof as we know the industry needs it to be. A lot of systems out there are based off of pullback style collet systems. So your basic chuck is a pullback system. 90% of what we sell in terms of our quick grip collet chucks are AccuLength or dead length chucks, push to close. So we didn't want to come out with a pullback chuck because you're going to buy a collet chuck, in our opinion, for what would be collet work. And that's probably going to be the predominant amount of work that you're going to run through it. You might want to do ID clamping as well, but you don't want to take a chuck on and off. Now, although we've got a pretty good system to where you can take our chuck off and put another chuck back on in probably about 10, 15 minutes, customers still want to be a little bit more productive, a little faster than that. So we're coming up with an ODID chuck that is going to be a dead length chuck as well. So you're going to be able to push to close, use it for most of the applications, so you can use it in the main and the sub-spindle machine, it doesn't matter. And then if you have a situation where, let's say on the sub-spindle, you want to clamp in an ID, you'll be able to adapt to our ID mandrels with just a different adapter setup. So that is something that, as far as I understand it, it'll fully go out to production to the masses later this year. Like I said, we're just making sure that everything is 100% perfect, because we do not want to have any issues in the field with our customers.
Well, that is really awesome. I do remember seeing that at IMTS. You showed us some of the stuff you guys had going on, so that's really exciting. And when you guys push that out, make sure you push it out to us so we can get that in front of our customers. I know that'd be a really good solution that they'd be, interested into learning more about. So thank you for being with us, everyone. Thank you for watching. And Zach, we hope to have you back again to talk about some milling solutions that you guys have for manufacturing.
Oh, I would love to do that. Thank you, Shae.
Yep, thank you.